Good evening. I'm Isaac BenEzra, host, co-producer of Conversations, now in our 13th year. And I am delighted to have with me today a colleague, a member of the board of directors of ACTV, Amherst Media, Yan Suras. Yan, welcome.
Thanks, Isaac. Thanks for having me.
Now, what's exciting about Yan is an exciting person, period. I have to say that. I'm looking forward to this discussion this afternoon. But he was recently named UNESCO Chair in Communications. Now, let me just read from that statement so we get some idea of what that implies. Yan Suras, Professor of Communication and Director at UMass, Director of the Center for Communication for Sustainable Social Change, has been named the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, Chair in Communications. Servaes, who has written extensively on issues related to communication for development and social change, and is internationally recognized for his theoretical contributions, will work closely with UNESCO to help achieve its goals. Specifically, and then we'll get into this in a minute, Servaes will provide impetus internationally and nationally to the study and practice of development, communication, and social change, and encourage a greater understanding of the role of that communication plays in poverty reduction and the promotion of human rights, gender equality, social justice, security, and good governance. Needless to say, his colleagues on the board are thrilled to have him as a colleague and to see this well-earned reward given to him.
Thanks.
So tell us, let's go into the specifics.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the international role, and then we'll get right down to Amherst, because as you know, today it's Amherst, tomorrow it's the world. Maybe.
Or vice versa, yeah.
I like to say it anyway.
Right.
The illusion of it sounds good.
Indeed, and everybody in Amherst likes to hear this, I guess. Yeah, I try to be active at all these different levels, being myself not a local, coming from originally Belgium. I've traveled quite extensively in the world, worked and lived in different parts of the world, done my duties at different levels, international organizational levels, within the context of Belgium and Holland, where I spent 8 years, and a couple of other countries. So at all these national, international, and local levels, I try to make myself useful and contribute to quote-unquote social change wherever I come and wherever I live.
Well, let's start out with right here in Amherst, since we're at the moment the center of the universe. How does your role impact at the campus level, as well as right here in terms of the learning center that we provided for students?
Yeah, when I arrived here, of course, you always have great expectations and objectives, and you need, after a while, to adjust those to more realistic levels. You need to learn how the rules of the game are being performed locally. You need to understand the power games, the politics, the cultural sensitivities, and all of that. That's not unique for Amherst. That's just
the way
there wherever you operate and wherever you pass through. Even as a tourist, I think many tourists forget that they are in another kind of culture, so they better adjust to that culture rather than expecting to live the life they have left in their home country. But so I had to adjust, so to speak. But I still remain quite active locally as well as internationally. Internationally, I continue getting invitations for consultancy and conferences. In 2 weeks' time, I'm going to Cairo, Egypt, for a keynote conference on on the future, the past and the future of communication research in the Middle East, in that part of the world. And of course now with everything going on there, the questions will also emerge. How is this related to the Arab Spring and what all these individual countries are going through? So it's going to be a very exciting and interesting conference, I'm sure. But here in Amherst, being the director of a research center, research in the context of UMass implies teaching and other kind of services to be rendered to local students and institutions. So here I basically try to run a place, mentor, facilitate discussions on topics related to the objectives which you pointed out. Of course, you don't have to put that in the sense that not all of those can be achieved and can be implemented at once or at the same time. So it's more something like a lifelong project rather than something which can be finished in a couple of months, if not years. But we teach courses on these subjects. We mentor, as I already mentioned, students at all these different levels, undergrad students, master level and PhD level students. We organize conferences. In August we had a pretty successful international conference attended by about 100 scholars from around the world, but mainly from China, because the topic of the conference was the future of US-China relationships, not so much in economic ways, but in the more soft power relationships, public diplomacy, the role of mass media, etc. And yeah, about 60, 70 scholars from mainland China attended the conference, and we will have publications as an outcome. Amherst Media taped most of the meetings, and I know they're still working on translations of certain segments and sections, but soon this will also be presented to the Amherst community, and I hope that there is, and I'm sure there is some interest from the local community in understanding what the future of US-China has in store for people locally. To add one more example to connect the UMass and the university to the local community through the work and the operations here at Amherst Media. I normally, as part of my undergrad courses, bring the students here as part of one class meeting, one field trip, so to speak. And I encourage them to get their hands dirty, do something of a more applied nature, learn how to use a camera, how to make a video. And it's not something everybody wants to jump on, but there were always a couple of them who think that this is the right way to address issues like social change through media. And they have become the cameraman or the people who do an internship here at Amherst Media. To make it more concrete, last year, as you may recall, we had a seminar on hip-hop for social change, and we brought in a group of people who were involved in hip-hop for social change organizations in Africa, although they themselves are Americans, but spent quite a bit of time in Western Africa and produced songs and video material with these groups. The video is still available, so everybody can watch that video, but now next year they will come back for a nationwide tour, bringing a number of African groups to the United States, and one stop will also be the Valley here, Amherst. And I stay in touch with these people, but some of the students will be the local organizers for that group, for that project. And that's always good to see how you can, on the one hand, encourage and stimulate people to do something of an applied nature, but which means applying what they learn in sometimes boring theoretical context courses. At the same time also engaging themselves and experimenting with these concepts of social change for development, social change with the component of hip-hop and music, etc. And I think that that's what education should be about. It's not only learning to mimic other people's theories, but also apply that in a real world environment.
You know, as you talked, I was connecting the work you're doing with students and connecting them with ACTV, and realizing that ACTV, or Amherst Media, however we want to refer to it, it's both, is part of a larger movement. I'm familiar with it in the United States, but I have no picture whatsoever of public access except for places like England. What does public access look like? What forms does it take in other countries? In other countries, we normally don't call it public access. That's a typical term used here in the US. Yeah, I appreciate that.
The more common denominator term is community media. And community media already indicates that it's something based in a community, that local people are involved in not only getting access to that media format, but also producing the media format, like it happens here at ACTV, where everybody who volunteers, who is interested, is welcome and can learn how to apply it. So. Of course, it's always culture specific, context specific, but in general, and we did a bit of research on that, you can basically see 4 formats of community media. One is, so to speak, the addition to what is already available at local levels, what is available at national, regional, and international levels. So it's not so much an alternative for something, but it's a complement. It's adding additional flavors to what other media are doing in a certain context. The second is much more the alternative, the dissident's voice, the opposition position one wants to play against powers, against vested interest, etc. And an element of that, I think, is also available in public access and in the context of Amherst. You also have those experiments and media which try to stay out of the traditional kind of debates and create something completely on their own, with their
value-free.
No, not necessarily value-free, with their own values. Sometimes that can go in directions of arts movements, which use media for their performances. Sometimes that's more ideological or social movement oriented. Whenever there is a strike, people involved in the strike, in the labor disputes, they may decide to use media for their voice, as their voice, and etc. And there is also, and I think that that's much more the future of community media and public access. It's media which are part of what is called civil society, which will always be there, but will identify different objectives and different ways of expressing themselves. So now it is, in the case of Wall Street, probably part of the Occupy Wall Street movement, but that may evolve into something else, a hip-hop movement, a theater movement, etc. So
or all of the above.
Or all of the above, and in a combination and in a creative way, integrating all of the above, indeed. So there are, to put it in a nutshell, there are different ways of categorizing and summarizing what is happening here, but I think glimpses, elements, examples of this exist everywhere in the world.
And that's the beauty of the possibilities for public access, or where people can have a voice, and the right to have a different perspective or point of view or political point of view is respected to a large degree, because it's the essence of what free speech is all about.
Especially in this country, indeed. But of course, as we both know, the crux of the matter is economic, is financial, how to maintain that kind of activity with the proper resources, which should not interfere with the content and the direction the station or the programs take, indeed. And that's also an ongoing debate in other parts of the world, in countries with more repressive regimes or dictatorial regimes. Nevertheless, one sees that these initiatives continue operating, sometimes under the radar, sometimes not visible for everybody around. But as we take the Middle East again as an example, at once they erupt and they become quite dominant and visible.
And the reality is that the technology has gone beyond what anybody dreamed about prior in terms of community organizing, in terms of being able to communicate with each other without being dependent on whoever is in control of the press or media.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good thing that technology offers this kind of flexibility and creativity, but it, as a consumer of all of this, it also needs some kind of direction or education how to use it. We are now longer in a culture like ours faced with scarcity. It's not that difficult to get all kind of information and all kind of sources, but we need to be educated and conscious and aware of the pitfalls and all the problems related to it. So it's, in a way, the discussion which was in the past related to scarcity, that the limited resources, the control exercised by governments and other institutions, that is no longer the major issue in our part of the world. It's now the overload which is becoming a problem. How zigzag through the system and still stay on target and get the right information, because a lot of the information we receive is manipulated, it's nonsense, it's noise, it's it needs to be put and understood in a context, and to understand it properly, often you need education.
And education has to deal with the fact that the control of media in many parts of the world are really the target for the future. If there's going to be if there's going to be dialogue and discussion, and we're going to have the information which we could say is truthful, then there are going to have to be other ways to communicate. And I was thinking that what's happening today is an perfect example of that. Not everything that comes through is truthful, but at least there are more options for information. Right. People are signing up for Facebook, and they're communicating with each other every day, and it's amazing, the technology. I still feel like I'm in the 20th century. It's amazing how information is coming to people every day, every minute, in so many different ways. You want to comment on how that's impacted on your program?
Yeah, let me use an example. At one point, together with colleagues, I was trying to understand, me being not a local, although I have had my interactions with the US and with this culture over the past 20, 30 years, so it's not that I am really new here, but moving as a family and with my kids, sending them to the local schools, etc., I started realizing that the kind of culture they were exposed to was not the kind of culture I was envisioning for them or where they come from. So I try to understand what it all means, and the media here do play a major part in it. The sexualization of the media, the narcissistic nature of the media, and as a result also the culture, etc. So I did a bit of research, collected material, wrote about this in a less positive way, emphasizing what I already mentioned, the narcissism involved in this, the dominance of major commercialization, etc. And nevertheless, at the same time, when you're trying to understand the complexity of all of that, you see things happening like Occupy Wall Street, where out of quote-unquote nothing emerges a group of people who by certain standards can be characterized as the same generation as the ones I was referring to just a minute ago, but still having objectives and a mission which is more in line with social change and with properly defined change objectives. So it's still possible, notwithstanding the dominance of that and the overwhelming nature of commercialization and so on. And for that reason, I started trying to understand it from what is, I think, is very important, from their perspective, from the perspective of what motivates them and how they reach levels of understanding and comprehension and enlightenment or conscientization, if I may use the term which I think is important to mention, originally advocated by Paulo Freire, one of the great philosophers in this area.
Who was that?
Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator who passed away a couple of years ago, but he wrote a couple of important texts and books, and I can only recommend everybody to read those. But just back to the issue I wanted to explain is, so I have always been looking for what I call participatory communication. How can people use communication in participatory ways to enlighten themselves, to empower themselves, to change not only themselves but also the society and the community around them. And in order to associate with my students, I gave it a twist with a subtitle, Hip Hop for Social Change. So this semester, for the first time, I offered that course, Hip Hop for Social Change, Participatory Communication, subtitle. And you'll see that, yeah, I don't want to quantify it, but a certain group of people, they came for the concept of hip hop. That was all they wanted to talk about, music, fashion, the way you express yourself through music, etc. But gradually, I noticed that the discussion became much more open and became also part of a discussion on social change. And now we are in the last phase, the last weeks of the course. They have to produce a project. A project is a selection of something which happens in the world. They need to report about that. And I'm very pleased to see that most of the projects are no longer about hip-hop as such, but are about hip-hop for social change.
But it was a vehicle to get into it.
Right.
It opened the door.
Right. And of course, the fact that something has happened in New York, that some things are happening in the Middle East, to name just two places, is being discussed in this kind of course, and is also therefore instrumental and a good entry point for them to associate their thinking and their quote-unquote sympathies with.
Have any of them gone down to
Yes.
either Wall Street or Northampton or Amherst?
Yes, they are quite heavily involved in all these activities, but I always try to encourage them, but at the same time warn them that there is also an obligation here back at the university. If they want to make proper use of their education, then they should also emphasize the study component of what is being made available. But yes, they are quite active, or most of them are quite active in these movements.
Well, one of the things that I want to do personally is to get better acquainted with what's happening locally. And on Friday from 5 to 7 in Northampton, there is a demonstration next to one of the major banks. And on Monday at 1 o'clock, next Monday at 1 o'clock, I've invited several of the occupiers to come and get a tour of Amherst television.
Mm-hmm.
Because central to people having a voice is the issue of resources.
Right.
And I'm introducing the idea that free speech and ACTV is one way in which people can communicate with each other. And of course, they're very interested in the idea, and that time was changed from this Friday. So if you're available, it would be great.
Yeah,
I'll tell you more about it
okay, thanks.
after the show. So I think we're getting close to wrapping up. I can't believe the time has gone so fast.
Yeah, indeed. If I may add one more thing to what we were discussing, I think it's important for us to realize the potential and the power of media, but I think that we also need to emphasize that the most important communication tool we have is what we are doing here, the face-to-face communication, the dialogue which we create as human beings. And sometimes you need media to amplify that, and that's going to be the program being broadcasted. But what takes place in a face-to-face communication format is what really matters to people and to communities.
You're absolutely right. In the last congressional campaign, I invited the Tea Party candidate, the Republican candidate, to be on Conversations. And it was very interesting. I learned a lot. They learned. And we finally found one issue that we agreed on. I don't remember what it is at the moment because it's so rare. But that invitation is still open to all people in the community who want change, and the issue is what kind of change and what are we working to change?
Right.
What do we want to? Where do we want to go? So, as always, it's time to wrap up, Yan. Thank you to the students and the staff here at ACTV Amherst Media. It's always great to see the younger people in our community that are using
Indeed, yeah.
This facility to learn how to communicate. One way of getting a message across and making it possible for old timers like me to still be on a soapbox in a different sort of a way. Thanks again, Yan.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck.
Same to you.
And great congratulations from all of us on your appointment.
Thank you.